And remember, we have huge sticks, so if you come by the crease, we got you.
I just saw a video recently of Ron Hextall knocking out Marilyn's teeth, so you're not lying.
Exactly.
Welcome everyone to Hockey Culture. This is the place where we're trying to change the culture of hockey, one interview at a time. And today we've got a very special guest joining us today. We've got NHL senior writer and the creator of the must-read Color of Hockey blog, Bill Douglas. Bill, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Bill, you grew up in Philadelphia and you caught the hockey bug, watched the 1972 Summit, Team Canada versus Russia. What was it about the game of hockey that attracted you to the sport?
I didn't know what the hell it was when I first saw it. It was the first thing. I was homesick. I was basically bedridden, and I was just watching television. And in those days, to tell you how old I am, there were 3.5 networks, the 0.5 being PBS, and PBS had the Russia Team Canada series on. So flipped it on, didn't know what it was, watched it, liked it, but had no idea really what hockey was. So, I got out of bed, crawled downstairs to the computer at that time, which was the Encyclopedia Britannica, looked up hockey, and, learned a little bit about the game. So, I got well, I saved allowance, bought skates, basically taught myself how to skate, saved more allowance, bought equipment, and basically taught myself how to play goal, to the point where I could join a team. So that's how I got sucked into hockey.
You must have been hustling, working, because saving up to play goal. I wanted to be a goaltender, but it was so expensive. I mean, what was it about the position? I think Vyacheslav Tretiak was the goalie back then for the Soviet team, and Tretiak is a goalie that I tried to emulate. I believe you wore number 20. And I wanted to be a goaltender because of Tretiak, and also because I love the equipment. What was it about the position that had you want to play?
There was so much padding the puck wouldn't hurt, which actually was a lie, because in those days, if you remember, the chest and arm were separate. It's not the body armor that it is today. It was like, felt arm pads and basically like a catcher's chest protector. So if the puck hit you, it definitely did hurt. But I think the fact that it was so much equipment and you sort of feel like you're armoring up to play, I think was the attraction to that. And of course the mask is just totally cool. I had an old Jacques Plante mask, back in the day, which basically, it didn't keep you from getting knocked out. It just kept you from bleeding, which was enough. But, just to be able to put that mask on and to get on the ice was just, that was the selling point.
So respectfully, is that why goalies are so quirky? Is that the reason why? Too many headshots?
We're not quirky. I don't know where people get that from. Goaltenders are not quirky people. The reason why we're goalies is we take great pride and great joy in denying people what they truly want, which is a goal. You're a goal scorer. I mean, that's what you live for. That's how your whole mindset is wrapped around. And just to be able to stop a puck, catch it in the glove, hold it in your face, I'm good for the day.
I love saying that because every time I mention that to a goaltender like yourself, you get all worked up. So I love the response. I mean, it's amazing how you still play the game to this day. You play once a week. Hockey on the Hill there in DC, which I think is amazing. Tell us about those games.
Well, I used to play with a bunch of guys. I've lived in DC since about 1997. And there are a bunch of guys I played with at the Fort DuPont rink, which is the only indoor rink in the District of Columbia. And, it was a cross-section of people. It was, bankers. It was people who worked on Capitol Hill, military people. Senator John Kerry, well, then Senator John Kerry, played with us at the time. So just to be able to get with a bunch of different people from different walks of life and get on the ice and play with them, it was fun. Now, the downside was it was 7:00 in the morning. So, you got to get up at like 5, eat something, get your contacts on, get to the rink. You're the first person in the rink, which means the rink is like a total icebox. But, it was fun and it was refreshing. And, if you ever visit the Fort DuPont rink, it's on a hill, and it basically overlooks the Capitol. It has the best view in the morning. of the Capitol and the Washington Monument. And just to see that in the morning sort of helps you wake up. And then, of course, the pucks hitting you also help you wake up too.
Well, speaking of Fort DuPont, we've had a friend of the show, Coach Henderson. What does he mean to hockey in the DC area?
You can't say enough about what Neil means to hockey in Washington, D.C. It's not a coincidence why, when the Caps won the Cup, one of the only rinks and one of the only programs they took the Cup to was to Fort DuPont, because it's safe to say that Neil Henderson is single-handedly responsible for creating a generation of Black hockey players and hockey fans in the D.C. region. As those kids who he had, when they were small, grew up, got married, moved out, they took their love of hockey with them across the country. So Neil is just so important to the game, not just here in DC, but, you could say across the country.
Well, I want to now move to 2012. That's when you started the Color of Hockey blog. And like I said in my open, it's a must read. What was your motivation behind starting that blog? Because you were a political reporter for so long.
Joel Ward. Joel is single-handedly responsible for the creation of the Color of Hockey. When Joel scored that goal, that overtime Game 7 winning goal against the Boston Bruins, he got a lot of racist feedback, via social media for that feat. And I'd sort of grown up thinking, well, kind of beyond that, there have been enough Black players in the NHL. People know Black players exist. People know Black players like hockey. And that moment showed me that, well, maybe not. So I started the blog just to sort of be able to educate people about the fact that we're involved in this game, that we've been involved in the game for a long time, not just as players, but, as coaches, in the front office, in other aspects of the game, in broadcasting, that we've been here and we're going to be here for a while. So that was the start. And it was funny because, I'm a journalist by trade. I've been working in newspapers since 1980, but I really didn't know that much about blogging when I started. So the first couple of posts I wrote, and then I was done. But then I realized, well, nobody's seeing this. So I read other hockey blogs. I was trying to figure out, well, how are they getting traction? So I just started writing stuff, and then I just started emailing to to Google, to Yahoo, to Sports Illustrated, to whomever. And they started aggregating my pieces. So that's how the traction sort of picked up. I started getting a following. And then, like a couple of years later, it's sort of like I had a following, which was weird, but good at the same time. And it just sort of grew from there.
How do you come up with all the stories you come up with? Because you're my go-to. When I need to find about something with people of color involved in the game of hockey, I make a point to read your blog. Where do you find these interesting nuggets?
I have no idea. No, I mean, it's sort of like, things because you've seen things, or you recall things from the past, from, when I was growing up and watching hockey. And, it's been a thrill to be able to go back and talk to, former players like yourself. I have a wonderful time. I always love interviewing Grant Fuhr because, of course, Grant's a goalie. Grant and I can speak the language of Black left-handed goaltending, and that's a joy. Grant taught me just by watching him play. He taught me how to cheat, basically. Grant used to always shade to his left a little bit if the puck was at the point and he felt the point man was going to take a shot. And he did that because he had one of the quickest right catching hands in the league at that time. So he would show top corner right, and they would bite. They would take it, and Grant would catch it, and he'd do that Statue of Liberty pose, sort of like whoop. And I told him that, and he said, "Yeah, I did that a little bit." So those things, but then there are also stories that either are undertold or haven't been told. I had a Color of Hockey post recently about Gerald Coleman. There was a lot written about Gerald at the time because he was a graduate of NHL Diversity, which was a precursor to the Hockey is for Everyone initiative. So he was the first one ever drafted by a team. Tampa Bay drafted him. And he was the first to appear in an NHL game. He played 2 games, 40 minutes for Tampa Bay. One game was against the Atlanta Thrashers. The other game was against the Florida Panthers. So, that was written about. But what people really didn't know at that time, or didn't pay attention to, was Gerald was the first Black U.S.-born goaltender to play in the NHL. And to this day, he's still the only Black U.S.-born goaltender to play in the NHL. So, I just sort of revisited Gerald a couple of weeks ago. I found him. He's in Michigan, studying to be a physical therapist. And, we talked about that first game he played in, because he Tortorella was the coach of Tampa Bay at the time. They were losing to Atlanta. And, Tortorella turns to Gerald, towards the end of the second period, saying, "Kid, you're going in next." And, you get that lump in your throat, and he's up there like, "Really?" So, he went in, and he remembers the first shot he faced was like a Peter Bondra one-timer, and he got it. And then he felt, yeah, I belong in the National Hockey League. But then, of course, Marian Hossa scored on the shorthanded breakaway goal. So he sort of came down to earth relatively quickly. But, those type of stories. And then once you start getting stories done, people come up with suggestions, or, tell stories that maybe they didn't tell before. And that helps you with story ideas and story generation.
Did you have any favorite stories? I was mentioning earlier about piggybacking on some of your ideas, and one of my favorite stories that I've been able to tell while at NBC Sports so far in my career is going down to El Paso and covering the game with the Rhinos when they played against the Mexican national ice hockey team. And that was after the shooting that took place down there. That was just an amazing experience to be able to cover that. And I've got to give a lot of credit to you. I talked to you in the summertime, and you're going to cover that game. And I was just learning from you about what was going on, what was happening. And I said, you know what? This is amazing. I need to go down there also too and see exactly what Bill's been talking about. And it's been a blessing, because as it turns out, USA Craft Hockeyville end up getting the submission from the El Paso Rhinos. And that community was so passionate about the game that they end up winning as Hockeyville USA.
Yeah, no, the El Paso trip is one of my favorite trips. Just to see, when people think of hockey, we have teams in California, we have teams in Florida, we have teams in Texas, but people really don't realize how much grassroots hockey is growing and has grown in places like El Paso, and what they have to do to get hockey, to get hockey done, to play hockey, to get ice on a rink. You remember that rink is like a total DIY. I mean, it's a converted, basically equestrian, Cow Palace show barn that they've made into a hockey rink. One of the locker rooms is an old shipping container. And you could just look at that place and look at the people that run that program and tell that they really love the game. More importantly, they've managed to sell hockey in a city that's over 90%, Hispanic, and the fans there are passionate. It's noisy, those noisemakers they make. It was just a whole lot of fun being there. And then you realize how close they are to the Mexican border. If you look back at their submission for Hockeyville, they did a video and they asked one guy, how close are you to Mexico? And he says, well, you can hit it with a slap shot. And he wasn't wrong. I mean, when they played the Mexican national team, walked across the border to get to the rink. Yeah, that's how close they were. And for them to win Hockeyville was just, a fantastic feat, because to do that means you have to be organized and you have to be passionate, almost borderline crazy, to get the submissions done, to get all the votes. And they did it, and they beat, hockey climates. They beat, I believe, like Wichita, Kansas. It was one city or one town in North or South Dakota. And I gather they did it by a wide margin. So, that trip was just so good, just to see, hockey in sort of a pure, innocent form, that people are dedicated enough to do what they have to do to make sure they can get the game and play the game they love.
Yeah, and I also was a great example being there and experiencing the fact that hockey has that ability to bring people together. They were going through a tough emotional time during that time because that guy that had shot all those people, was shooting because they're Hispanic for no other reason. So to see the Mexican national ice hockey team come together with that community also, and just look around the stands, I saw people in tears hugging each other, the pregame warmups as they celebrated people's lives that were lost. That was a tremendous moment on my life, and that's something that I would never forget also.
Exactly. I mean, that team, the El Paso Rhinos, I mean, one of the things that they stress is community and responsibility to community. And they, when the shooting happened, they stepped up. I mean, they actually pledged $10,000 to help with the recovery. And that's, for a junior team, that's a pretty big deal. But they didn't blink. They just said, okay, we're going to do this. So it just shows how dedicated they are, not just to putting on hockey, but how dedicated they are to be a part of the fabric of the community.
How has the game become more diverse? I mean, you cover it as closely as anybody in the game of hockey, and you've seen the growth of diversity in the game. Talk to me about how much more diverse it has become since you started covering it.
Oh, almost leaps and bounds. I mean, I can go back to when I started playing, as a kid back in the 70s. I had a best friend growing up in Philadelphia. His dad was a Flyers season ticket holder. And so I used to go to games, and my buddy and I would used to count the number of people of color in the arena, in the Spectrum at that time. And it took us a couple of years to get off of one hand. When I started playing, I was lucky. My Bantam team, there were 3 other Black players, but then I got to play junior hockey for a season. And, on my team, I was the only Black player. And in the league, I was one of 3 Black players. So if you look at where hockey has come today from where it was, it's pretty significant. Part of that, I think, stems from the changing demographics of North America. I think part of it stems from, prosperity within, communities of color to be able to afford to play hockey. I mean, for example, for a lot of African Americans who might have, gotten married, had kids, moved to the burbs, their kids are playing what their friends are playing, and their friends might be playing hockey. So they're playing hockey. I think, part of that is part of the equation. Part of it is, I think, hockey is a game that, once you see it, it sucks you in. I mean, you're Canadian, so it's sort of part of your DNA. I mean, you grew up in Canada, hockey is a no-brainer. But if you grow up in like Philadelphia or New York, and now LA or Frisco, Texas, you have to see it. But then once you see it, you're sucked into it. I think that's what's happening with in a lot of communities, in the Black community, in the Hispanic community, but also you've gotten to the point now where there've been enough NHL players of color playing that you can see role models, and not just see them, playing as, just as, quote unquote Black players or quote unquote Hispanic players, but playing as stars in the league. You look at Austin Matthews, you look at Seth Jones, you look at PK Subban, or earlier, if you look back to Tony McKegney, who, one could argue was the first Black superstar in the National Hockey League because he scored over 40 goals, the first Black player to do that. So you saw people who looked like you doing sort of star things, and I think that attracts people to the game as well. So, that's been helpful. The next phase sort of is to get these kids playing, have them continue play, and have them go on, if they have the skill and they have the desire to play elite hockey. And we're seeing a little bit of that going on now. I mean, this past summer, the Next Gen Foundation and the NHL sponsored a team of all Black and brown players to play in a summer tournament in New Hampshire. This team included some players who are playing in college, who were drafted by NHL teams, and they won the tournament. And, people see that, and they see the possibilities. And, kids will look at that and say, well, yeah, maybe I can do that.
It's not just the boys or the men playing, it's the women also. You get the Blake Boldens, the Kelsey Colzers, the Sarah Nurses, the Julie Chews, the Bridget Laquette. How important is it that you're seeing this increase in women playing the game of hockey when it comes to BIPOC and even Black women playing the game of hockey?
I think that's extremely important. Women's hockey in the United States is one of the fastest growing components of the game. And there's no reason why people of color, girls, women of color, should not be involved in that. If they have the skill and they have the desire, they should be able to play. So, again, it comes down to having those role models. Definitely, Blake Bolden is definitely a role model as a player in college, but now as a scout for the Los Angeles Kings. Kelsey Colzer, first Black first round draft pick, number 1 pick in the NWHL back in 2016. Now she's the first Black female head coach of an NCAA college hockey program, Arcadia University, which will begin play next season. Sarah Nurse, has a silver medal from the Winter Olympics. So all of this contributes to showing girls the possibilities. And like the boys, you've got these girls who are, playing what their friends are playing and getting involved in hockey. And then they can see that there are players that look like them who are achieving success in the game, and maybe dream about playing someday in the Olympics like Sarah Nurse did. So no, it's extremely important.
I know you'd like to cover the past, you like to cover the present. Well, let's talk about the future. Where do you see the game heading in the next 10 or 15 years?
Oh God. I mean, I think the game will become more diverse. It's hard to believe that this game can get faster, but it's probably going to get faster. Everybody's trying to keep up with Connor McDavid. So this next generation of player will probably pay much more attention to their skating, edge work, speed, agility. It's just going to become a much faster game. And I think you're going to see more players of color in the game and in the game at high levels. I mean, you look at the last draft. I mean, Quentin Byfield going number 2 to the LA Kings. You look at players of color like Akil Thomas, who probably never has to pay for a meal in Canada again after scoring that goal at the World Juniors. All these players are contributing to creating another generation behind them. Just as you did as a player. I think you don't pat yourself on the back enough for the impact that you had. I mean, God knows how many Black players out there would not be wearing dreads and not for you, right? So, it's a question of generations, really. That this current generation of player of color will produce probably even more. And, with the demographics of the United States and Canada changing, becoming more Black and brown, you're going to have more players of color in hockey. Therefore, you're probably going to have more players of color in the National Hockey League. So I think that's what the future holds.
Yeah, I'm certainly seeing it right now. It's happening before our eyes. It's not going to happen overnight quickly, but I'm definitely seeing a gradual increase in participation, players of color, Black players, women. The game definitely is getting more diverse, 100%. So if anyone says it's not happening, they're lying. And I just want to correct you. Yes, I grew up in Canada, but I'm a dual citizen, so I could talk about issues on both sides of the border. Depends when in Rome, do as the Romans do. But on that note, I don't want Corrine and the girls to yell at me for taking up too much of your time. So I want to thank you, Bill. I appreciate you joining us on Hockey Culture today. Like I said, the Color of Hockey blog, it's a must-read, hockey fans. If you guys want to catch up on anything to do with players of color in the National Hockey League, or just people of color involved in the game, off-ice officials, front office folks, men, women involved in the game, please find Bill's blog. It's a must-read. You're a busy man. I know you cover politics and hockey, and you play net too. I won't make any more goalie jokes because I know it might offend you. Goalies are a little sensitive. So thank you, Bill, for joining us today on Hockey Culture.
And remember, we have huge sticks, so if you come by the crease, we got you.
I just saw a video recently of Ron Hextall knocking out Marilyn News' teeth, so you're not lying.
Exactly.